What's going on, everyone? Coach D here, coming to you from Johnny O's Gym. Hey, I got another YouTube video for y'all. And today, for all those people out there that maybe are thinking about finding best ways to lose weight, I'm going to give you some of my best experiences having worked with clients for over, or coming up on 9 years now, who have really focused on weight loss. What are some of the best practices that you can put in your life right now to help you lose weight? And of course, as always, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. That is very helpful to support the channel. And so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So first and foremost, we'll talk a little bit about weight loss and obesity, exactly like what it is, right? So obesity is kind of just a fancy way of saying you have excess body fat that's accumulated on your body in a way that kind of leads to some unhealthy outcomes. The short and skinny of it is essentially by accumulating this excess body fat, you have a lot of markers on your body that go up in a negative way, specifically for your vascular system and your cardiovascular system that leads to negative health outcomes. Things like increased risk of stroke, diabetes, heart attack, things that I'm sure y'all are probably familiar with. And unfortunately in the States and a lot of the Western or developing world, obesity rates have gone up over time. You can kind of just check this graph up that I got here showing the prevalence of obesity going up in the States year after year. And what we see is that in general, as you can imagine, it's increasing quite a bit. And so currently how we sit here in 2024 is obesity is over about 42% here in the States. Actually, funny enough, it did go down a small amount in the last year. The reason behind that, we're not too sure if it's maybe COVID reporting or if it's something where, with the inflation and the economics of this country has kind of altered it a bit. But just so we're aware, the obesity rate in the country is still somewhere around 42%, which of course is close to half the population. We also see it rising in people under 18 years old, right? So that 42% number is for those over 18. But as you see in this graph here, over time for kids, it's also going up too, which used to not be as prevalent. But of course, now with more sedentary lifestyle, with the removal of PE and just kind of how our food environment has changed over time, unfortunately, it's seeing more prevalent in our kids as well as the years go on. And so I say this all to say is that it is more common than people think, or even though people know that it is more prevalent, understanding that you're not alone in this, right? There's a lot of people dealing with obesity that are trying to better themselves, trying to live a happier, healthier life. And so I'm going to give you some practical tools today to kind of help you figure out what exactly you can do in the immediate so you can start working towards losing some weight. All right, so another important thing to distinguish, and this is also important because when I work with clients, this is a conversation you always have to have, is first and foremost, making sure that you actually are someone who does have obesity and you classify as having this disease process. Now, of course, I'm not a doctor and not a registered dietitian. You should always consult them, or if you're with a competent trainer to help you kind of navigate this problem. But here are kind of some tips to understand if you in fact do qualify. Because let me give you an example, right? Way back when I first started training, I had a client come in for just a consultation. A young lady, she was in her 20s. She's about 5'6", weighed about 130, 120 pounds. And she came to me and she, physically looked very slender. Obviously, looks are not the easiest way to go about it, but she was very thin in general. And she looks at me, she's like, I'd like to lose a lot of weight. And I'm just looking at her and of course trying to keep my composure. I'm like, okay, tell me more. Tell me why you want to lose weight as someone who's 5'6", 120-ish pounds. She's like, well, I really don't like how I look. I want to, look more healthy. I want to feel more comfortable. And when I was in high school, I weighed about 110, 105 pounds. Come to find out when we talk a little bit deeper, of course, maintaining your confidentiality, she ended up talking about how she had a really bad relationship with food, probably some form of eating disorder, and how she had this negative association with food and how her body looked, despite the fact that when we did some more tests for her, she really did not need to lose any weight. And we ended up talking about how building muscle and kind of participating in weight training and just being active would be better for her. And of course, referring her to the proper people like a registered dietitian or like a counseling and psychological services professional. And so here's a couple of tips to understand if you are even a good candidate for weight loss in the beginning versus maybe you're just someone who wants to build muscle or get active, maybe needs to develop a little bit of a relationship or a healthy relationship with food with someone like an RD or a counselor. So there's a couple of quick and easy methods we use. The first one that we use is what we call BMI, body mass index. You can literally Google, and I'll put a link down below where you can figure it out, where you just do a correlation of your height and weight. Now, huge disclaimer here. I know some people are going to watch this and say, I thought BMI was all BS. I thought that thing was kind of old school. And there is a small grain of truth to it, right? Because BMI is more so used on a population level. that graph that you saw earlier showing the country and how BMI or obesity has changed over time is actually from BMI data. But what we see is that in general, as like a quick and dirty screening, it does have some validity, especially when we compare it with some of these other measures, which I'm going to show you here in a sec. So BMI first and foremost, if you have a BMI of 30 or more, that should be a good indicator. Okay, maybe I should look at some of these other tests further with a trainer, with a doctor, etc. The next one you can do is body fat percentage. And there's a lot of ways you can measure it, right? And if you get a good, competent trainer, you can definitely check these out. Or if you go see a physiologist, whatever it is, you can look at body fat for men and women respectively. For men, we want to be under 25%. For women, we want to be under 32%. Generally, women tend to carry a little bit more body fat than men on average. So that's why you see kind of that discrepancy there. So if you have a BMI over 30, and then you go and get your body fat tested and it's over 25 for men, over 32 for women respectively, if both those are high, should cue you in again, okay, maybe I'm leaning in this direction for weight loss. And then kind of a third one that you can use, like a third layer of like determining, am I a good candidate for weight loss, is waist circumference, measuring your waist. I've done tons of videos talking about how to do this yourself because it's a very simple trick that you can learn. Basically, you're just feeling for the top of your hip bone, going around in a circle around your stomach. For men, if we're under 35 inches, for women, if we're under 40, we're good. If we're at that cutoff or above it, again, it's another indicator that weight loss is appropriate. So if you're hitting all three of those, high BMI, high body fat percentage, high waist circumference, probably a good idea to start considering or at least talking with your healthcare professional and an RD, and if you got a coach, about losing weight. And then, of course, there's some other examples, things like general health markers that you may actually see in a blood report or when you go see a doctor, things like your blood glucose level, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, right? These are all other markers that if those are also elevated, combined with the markers we just talked about for BMI, body fat, and waist circumference, definitely probably a good indicator that weight loss is going to be very, very helpful for you as a person because those numbers are going to go down, which leads to better health for your heart, for your vascular system, and of course, just for your body overall. Okay, so now that we've gotten out of the way, right, you've determined that you're actually someone who's a good candidate for weight loss, right? If you check those numbers and you're like, actually, I'm healthy in most regards, I just need to be active, that is a whole separate issue. We're assuming now that you're someone who's at a place where, yep, I definitely know that weight loss is going to be good for me. How am I going to track it over time is now a very important question we got to address. So when it comes to tracking weight, there's, two main things we got to consider. First is the conversation about the scale, and then there's the conversation what we call non-scale victories. First, let's focus on the scale. I'll give you a quick story. Remembering going back to my very first client, young lady who wanted to lose weight, and she was a good candidate for weight loss. She had PCOS. She was dealing with some health concerns that were affecting her hormones, and she had a decent amount of weight to lose, and so I had to track it over time. Come to find out, she's someone who wasn't very comfortable with the scale, and so I actually determined that I wasn't going to weigh her for the first couple of weeks to a month and just focus on her getting active. Now, some people may give me pushback saying, well, how are you going to know that she's losing weight if you're not tracking it? And yeah, there's a little bit of truth in that. But if I hurt her confidence so much or make her too anxious to show up to the gym because she knows I'm going to constantly weigh her, or if the fear of getting one bad number is going to stop her from putting an effort in the gym, why would I do that? And so as yourself, whether you're working by yourself or working with a coach, you need to kind of have a conversation with yourself internally thinking, am I someone right now who's in a good place to weigh myself on the scale? Or do I need to just focus on just showing up to the gym, just being active and worry about the scale later, which there's nothing wrong with either one. So if you are someone who is comfortable with the scale, what I would recommend doing is weighing yourself 2 to 3 times per week. And let me kind of explain why. If you only weigh yourself once a week, you're only getting a very, very small snapshot of your body weight in that given period of time. And I'm sure as we know, weight can fluctuate drastically, anywhere from 5 pounds plus, depending on how much you weigh per day, given what you're doing. The time of day, if you use the bathroom, if you're overly or underhydrated, what your diet is like for the day, what you ate the previous day. For my girls out there, if you are on your cycle, there are so many things that can influence your weight day to day that just doing one weigh-in once a week and tracking that is not going to be an accurate representation of your progress. So let's say, you're tracking your progress and you notice that the scale goes up a pound one day and then it goes up another pound, then it's the same. In your mind, you might be thinking, and understandably so, that, man, I'm just not making any progress, man. I am weighing myself on Monday every week and it's just not going down. But little did you know, if you weighed yourself a couple other days throughout the week, you actually would notice that it did go down at times. You're just catching yourself on a bad day. And so what I would recommend is weighing yourself 2, ideally 3 times a week. I like to do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, because I'm getting a snapshot throughout the entire week. It accounts for your activity or your dietary pattern on the weekend. And then what you do is you take the average of the week, right? So if you're 200, 201, 202, your average is 201, right? And that is kind of your weekly average that you use to track over time, rather than using some random high number that came in one time, and now it demotivates you and derails your progress. And again, the important thing to know with weight loss too is it's not going to be a linear process, right? Where, every single week I'm just going to nice and go down all the time constantly. You're going to have times where it plateaus, where it goes up, where it drops drastically, and everything in between. And the biggest piece of advice I can give you is don't focus on the day-to-day or the week-to-week. You got to zoom out every now and again and look at the overall trend over time. Meaning if you started here, and yes, you have these highs and lows and these plateaus, but if you're currently at a spot that's lower, that's progress, right? That's what you want to look at, is the long-term trend, not the day-to-day fluctuations, because just like that, stuff fluctuates day-to-day, and that's completely normal. Now, again, if you're not someone who's comfortable with the scale quite yet, the main thing you're going to focus on, and same thing if you are weighing yourself, but this is extremely more so important if you're not focusing on the scale, you just focus on showing up and being active, because that is going to be infinitely more beneficial than just not showing up or demotivating yourself by standing on the scale. And so coming to the gym, putting in good effort, focusing on moving your body, doing your strength training, doing your cardio, that's going to be what your main focus is for those first couple weeks to a month until you feel more comfortable getting on the scale. And of course, for both those, whether you track yourself on the scale or you don't, a big focus is going to be what we call non-scale victories. These are important because, like I said, even if you are tracking multiple times a week or you're not even weighing yourself, there are going to come times where motivation is going to be low, where you feel like you want to press what I call the fuck it button, where you're like, this isn't working. I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I going to this stupid gym? Like, I feel like I'm not making progress, because you're not focusing on any other kind of aspect of how you can track your progress in the gym. Things like, how's your quality of sleep? Are you getting stronger? Do you have more energy? Do you notice that your clothes fit different, right? One of the biggest things I notice is that clients, they say maybe the scale hasn't moved too much or they haven't checked it too much, but they're like, coach, I have to keep going on a different notch on my belt, or man, my clothes feel kind of baggy on me. I think I got to go shopping this weekend because my clothes don't fit me anymore. Or people start noticing because you haven't seen someone in a couple weeks or a month, and a family member or friend is like, okay, I see you looking a little different. You're looking good, right? You start having some aesthetic changes that maybe you don't recognize because you see yourself day to day, but others around you see. And so it's really important to have these non-scale victories, so that way you can refer back to them and say, yeah, maybe the scale didn't move this week, or maybe I don't think I noticed any weight changes this week, but I got stronger in my leg press. I feel better. I've been going to sleep better. I'm less agitated. My anxiety is lower than it typically is, because you're being active and you know that you're benefiting. And then the weight's going to come off, right? You don't got to worry about that. 1 week, no big deal. There's other things I can refer to know that I'm doing my body and mind a good service. Again, the last thing we're going to kind of talk about here, okay, now that we kind of have an understanding of what weight loss is, who's a good candidate, and how we're going to track it over time, is now we're going to focus on the dietary side to kind of wrap things up here about, okay, what should my diet look like? How do I know to start actually approaching weight loss that's supported with my exercise? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? The first thing I'm going to say is it's a game of calories, right? As it stands right now, outside of some rare examples, but even people who maybe have some hormone issues, it's not your hormones. It's not this one food that's messing up your metabolism. It's a game of calories in, calories out. And I know just saying that doesn't make it easy. I'm very well aware of that, where it's like, oh, you just need to cut your calories and move more. Yes, that's true, but I know actually taking those steps is very difficult and not so simple. But at the end of the day, we do need to make sure our calories are going down, so that way we have less energy coming in. We're putting more energy out in our workout, and that is what's going to create this negative energy balance that allows us to actually lose weight over time. So how do we practically do that? There's two main ways that I like to do with my clients. And again, you got to determine which way is going to work best for you, your personality, and overall, what's going to support you and your lifestyle. The first one is tracking. I would definitely recommend downloading an app. It's called MyFitnessPal. It's really, really helpful. I use it with my clients that like to track this way. And the most important thing here is you don't have to be crazy about it, which is, bringing a scale with you everywhere and figuring out exactly to the gram what everything weighs. You do not have to do that. What I tell my clients is you want to be consistent, not perfect. So tracking as consistently as possible, leaning on the conservative side, meaning, okay, I'm trying my best to understand that this is what a tablespoon of peanut butter is, this is what a cup of rice is, and I'm being as consistent as I can over time. And so what I have my clients do is I say, hey, download the app. I teach them how to use it. It's very intuitive, very simple to use. And I say, I want you to track your calories for me for 1 week, every day, Monday through Sunday. And then what we do is we kind of take a little bit of a snapshot and look at what a week of eating looks like for them. Their total calories on average, their protein, their carbs, and their fat. And now we have at least a general idea of what they're eating. Now from there, here's a general rule of thumb. I'm gonna cut or recommend that you cut your calories somewhere between 300 to 500 calories per day. Because what we know is by cutting out 500 calories a day, 7 days a week, that leads to 1 pound loss per week. 300 is a little bit more conservative, right? So it won't be as big a change. Add that with the exercise and you're gonna be losing about 1 pound a week. If you feel like you can go a little bit more, you can do up to 1,000 calories, but depending on the person, that may be a little bit aggressive. So 500 calories less a day is usually a safe place to start. So now you can track in the app, you know that, okay, generally I eat about 2,200 calories. Now I'm gonna cut it down to 1,700 and I'm gonna make sure that I'm consistently each day getting as close to 1,700 as possible. And the big thing I tell people is make sure that you keep your protein relatively high, cutting your carbs and fat, because while you're lifting weights, you wanna make sure that you're still building some muscle, right? You don't wanna lose what little muscle we may have before we were starting our weight loss journey here. Now, let's say you're like, whoa, coach, that's silly. I'm not downloading some app. I'm not tracking my food. I'm not looking up the macros at my restaurant. There's absolutely no way. There's another way that we can do it, and that is called the removal diet or the removal process. So again, I'll ask my clients to kind of track what they eat throughout a week, take photos of it and send it to me. And then what I recommend them doing is say, okay, now that we have an idea of what you tend to eat on a week-to-week basis, because most people eat relatively the same thing in a week-to-week situation, maybe a little different on the weekends, but y'all kind of get the gist of it. Then I say, for each main meal that you have, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, remove half of your carb or your fat and keep your protein as high as possible. Let me give you some practical examples. Breakfast, you have some eggs, some toast, some peanut butter, and maybe a protein bar, right? If you have 2 slices of toast, I'm gonna ask you to cut it in half and only have 1 slice of toast. That's about 100 to 150 calories that you're cutting out right there just from breakfast. Then for lunch, you have chicken or steak with some rice, some veggies, and some avocado. Now I want you to cut that avocado in half, right? So you got a whole avocado, that's your main fat. Cut it in half. Now you're cutting out, again, another 100 to 150 calories from your fat source. And then for dinner, again, say you have some, mom's cooking up, you got some chicken, pasta, marinara sauce with some olive oil and some broccoli, and then maybe you got a little dessert coming in for the night. Maybe you cut the dessert in half, or maybe you substitute dessert for something healthier, right? Say you have like ice cream and a Coke for dinner or for dessert. Instead, what you can do is maybe do a Coke Zero and maybe do like a healthier ice cream option, like a Halo Top ice cream where the calories are a little bit lower, protein's a little bit higher, right? So I can remove foods by cutting my fat or my carb in half, or I can maybe replace them with lower calorie options, thinking of things like Coke Zero or 0 calorie soda, energy drinks throughout the day that are low calorie, replacing them if you do something like a Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, cutting them with a lower calorie drink or food item. That is what's going to carry you throughout the day. And if you do that day to day, just cutting out or cutting in half one of those food portions in each meal, you're gonna get to 500 calories very easily. And it's not gonna be the easiest thing. You are gonna notice it a little bit for sure, especially those first couple weeks. But I guarantee you, you're gonna see over time like, wow, I actually can make this progress. I can make this happen just by making these small incremental changes over time. And then the last thing I'm gonna say is a little bit about some diet myths, right? So there's always gonna be people online, they're saying like, oh, don't eat this, it's gonna kill you, or don't do that. And if you listen to everyone, it sounds like at that point, there's nothing you can eat but ice cubes and water, right? You get to that point where every food group becomes a bad food group. You have the carnivore and ketogenic diet group, right? Where they say vegetables are poisonous and are gonna kill you. Then you have the anti-red meat group, which is like, well, red meat's gonna kill you. And then you have the group where it's high protein's gonna kill you. And it's like, if you listen to everything, again, it's gonna be very difficult. And so What I'm gonna tell you, outside of some very specific medical conditions or some maybe family history, the overall trend with all these diets is just that they're cutting the calories down. So let me kind of walk you through, right? Take the carnivore slash ketogenic diet, right? Carnivore is kind of like a rebranded version of keto in a sense, where pretty much you're cutting out most carbohydrates. You're cutting out a lot of your rice, your grains. Some of the carnivore diet allow you to eat a little bit of fruit and very, very minimal vegetables. But overall, your carbohydrates are extraordinarily low. Well, obviously you're going to lose weight. You're cutting out one major macronutrient, which is your carbohydrate. What about intermittent fasting, right? I'm only going to eat between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. Chances are you're skipping breakfast, so you're cutting out an entire meal of your day, probably eating less calories. Wow, less calories equals weight loss. Again, and I'm not here to demonize, right? So I've had clients that do some of these diets and they actually like them and they do it in a healthy, sustainable way. That's awesome if you like it, but know that you do not have to do these particular diets. They're more so just gimmicks or ways to sneak in that you're having less calories day to day or meal to meal, which ultimately supports weight loss, just like any other diet does. Some people may say, oh, I have to eat more frequently to boost my metabolism, where I'm gonna do 6, 7, 8 meals a day. Again, not really changing much, and same thing with time of day. It doesn't really matter too much, just for the general scope of losing weight. Whether I eat all my calories at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., a calorie is a calorie. So if I make sure that I keep my macros and my calories low for my goals to support my weight loss week to week, it doesn't matter how many meals you do it in or what time of day you eat it in. It just matters that you can do it consistently to where you lose weight over time. So if you like to eat 4, 5, 6 meals, because that keeps you full, has good energy throughout the day, cool, go ahead and do that. Or if you're someone who's like, I don't really like to eat in the morning, I feel kind of nauseous if I eat super early, and I really just like breakfast, lunch, lunch, dinner, and maybe a little snack, that's cool too. As long as you're cutting the calories, that's what's ultimately gonna help you support your weight loss goals. And that's it, y'all. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Know that when I do our next YouTube video, part 2 of this series, I'm gonna focus specifically on exercise. So what exercise strategies to use to now pair with the diet, now that you have an understanding of what obesity is and if you qualify for losing weight. And then we're gonna combine those two together so you can have kind of a basic exercise program for yourself and ultimately work towards your weight loss goals. And as always, thank y'all so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We got daily content on the socials. If you're interested in coaching with me in person or virtually, just go ahead and head to the website, click any of those take action buttons, fill out a new client form, and I'll get in contact with you as soon as possible. And of course, I'll see you in the next one. Later.